Hey there! Before we dive into today's episode, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're helping us spread the word and connect with more amazing people like you.
Welcome to Webe Pärents, where parent doctors Matthew Lederman and Alona Pulde explore current parenting topics, share stories, and help bring families closer together.
Hi, I'm Dr. Alona Pulde.
And hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Lederman.
Our overarching topic of the day is mediating fights.
But before we dive into today's episode, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for your support.
Our overarching topic of the day is mediating fights.
We're going to start with some headlines and heartlines around this topic.
Headlines and heartlines.
In Headlines and Heartlines, we play with ideas, answer your burning questions, tackle some current events, and find the balance between taking things seriously and keeping a sense of humor. So on today's topic of mediating fights, I have a few stories to share. The first one is about a little girl who tried to mediate a disagreement between her two cousins over which board game to play. Who hasn't been there mediating a fight over what board game to play? The little girl wanted to be fair, so she suggested that they play both games, one after the other. However, instead of resolving the issue, this suggestion led to a new argument about which game should be played first. Both cousins became even more stubborn, and the disagreement escalated to the point where neither was willing to play anything at all. So in the end, they all just sat in silence, and the little girl was completely disheartened that her effort to be a peacemaker ended up with no one playing anything at all. How many of us have been in that situation of trying to figure something out, and then it just escalates to a whole new realm of bickering?
I know I've been there with the kids where I want to go first and they're fighting with me to go first or second. So
yes. There we go. Sometimes it's not with your kids, it is with your partner. Here's another one. During a class project, a boy saw his friends arguing over how to divide tasks. He stepped in and suggested that they should split the work evenly. However, this solution didn't account for the fact that one friend felt like he had already done more than his fair share. So instead of calming the situation, the boy's suggestion made this friend feel even more unappreciated, and that led to an escalated, heated exchange. The project stalled as a result, and the boy learned that trying to mediate without fully understanding what the situation was and what all was involved could actually make things worse.
Yeah, these examples are great because they show if you jump into strategizing or trying to resolve the conflict too quickly, it's going to fail. And then without that quality of connection where you really see the feelings and needs behind why someone feels the way they do, you're going to often escalate the problem instead of disarm and resolve it.
Yeah, and even when you have the best of intentions, which, was in this case here, the best of intentions was to try and figure it out. But like you said, when you jump into strategy without understanding or having an idea of what all is in your mix.
And then you can get frustrated too, right? Because you're trying to help and you say you have this strategy that makes a lot of sense in your head if you're the one trying to help mediate. And then they're saying no, and they have a problem with it. And you're like, what's going on? Like, this makes perfect sense. And sometimes they're just not even ready to strategize because they haven't felt heard and understood. And this great strategy falls on deaf ears. And then now you got three people who are tight and in conflict. So this great intention just falls short.
Yep. Indeed. And then a final story to share is a story that involved a young boy who tried to mediate a fight between two classmates arguing over who got to be the goalie in a soccer game. The boy, hoping to resolve the problem quickly, suggested that they both take turns. However, instead of calming the situation, the suggestion made both kids more upset as they each wanted to be the goalie for the entire time. The argument escalated and the game was eventually abandoned altogether. And the boy felt terrible because he, again, was trying to help, was trying to make things better. And instead, his efforts backfired and the game wasn't played at all. So I love it. All three of these kind of suggest that same thing, that when we are so quick to jump into strategy, what to do versus try and connect to what are underlying needs and what are the needs that are going unmet that are leading to the desire to strategize in a particular way. Often it ends up backfiring and not the way that we hoped.
And that's what we're going to talk about later today, which is how to approach conflict. And as a parent, how do we support the connection versus try to figure out what to do? A lot of times figuring out what to do will naturally manifest itself. And if we come in with the energy of we got to fix this, we got to resolve it, we got to make the bickering stop, all of those intentions can lead us down a path of disconnection. And it's really, how do we help restore connection between the people? And do they even want that? And do they find that helpful in the moment? Sometimes I'm actually so frustrated if I'm in a conflict, I'm not in a place where I even want to connect with the other person. And that's helpful to identify too.
Absolutely. And it actually very nicely leads into our next segment.
Cheers and tears.
So in Cheers and Tears, we share things that went really well and some things that didn't quite go as planned. And it's all about learning and growing together. So on that vein that you were sharing, sometimes when you're in the midst of the bickering, there is no desire to connect with the other person. There's no desire to try and figure it out with them. There's too much hurt or upset. And this is actually an example with our daughters. Kylie, our oldest, is super, super generous with her stuff. Our younger one, Jordan, borrows her clothes and makeup and hair supplies all the time. However, when Kylie wants to borrow something, Jordan, who struggles a little bit more with that free generosity, can sometimes be more stingy about sharing. And sometimes she even has a good reason as to why. Jordan returns things in the same state or as close to the same state as she received them. And Kylie is sometimes less careful about how things are returned. However, regardless of what Jordan's reasons are, when she says no to Kylie, it hits Kylie really hard. So many needs come up for Kylie at that moment. Fairness, care, mattering. All she wants to do is then stick it to Jordan so that Jordan can experience the same pain that she's experiencing. So I told you she was generous, so she's even going to share her pain. But she does not want to understand where Jordan is coming from at that moment. She's too hurt for that.
And even as the parent coming in, when I see Kylie sticking it to Jordan, I might come in without context and on the surface be thinking Kylie's being unreasonable. So then I get charged up. And if I'm charged up as the parent, I'm not in a place to mediate or support connection, because supporting connection requires me to be able to see the needs underlying Kylie's experience and the needs underlying Jordan's experience. And if I can see both of those, and ultimately if they can see both of those, then people can come together. So the first thing I found is, check my own pulse.
I love that because, as you were saying that, what came up for me was in that moment, and it's something that I don't think I even realized it as a parent until right as you were talking, is when I see them bickering like that, I become really attached to stopping the bickering as a means of meeting my need for peace of mind. Right? Mm. And so I become attached to stopping it, and I become activated by the urgency around how do I get this to stop? Right? And so that is, for me, that was a great awareness, because If I'm attached to any outcome, I am not in a space to support connection.
Right, because connection is that curious, open, let's see what unfolds.
Right.
Versus having an agenda. And sometimes as parents, we're under-resourced. Often as parents, we're under-resourced where we're tired, we're hungry, we're overstimulated, we got tension, we got responsibilities. So we do just want there to be quiet and peace. When that's the case, though, own that. Even if it's internally, and say, oh, right now I'm so dysregulated, I just want that noise to go away. Versus coming under the guise of, I want to help you figure it out. And then sometimes you want to come and help them figure out, but that's like you have like 3 exchanges in you at most. And if those hit resistance, you go very quickly from wanting to help them figure it out to going back to wanting peace and quiet. And then you could quickly use the power over, which is, all right, and this is how it's going to be, or we start judging. Kylie, you're being unreasonable. You're being mean to your sister. And, and then Kylie
Why
feels
can't you
hurt.
make this easier?
Right. So It does require that slowing down. And then that allows goodwill to build. We talk about that with the kids. Do you have goodwill? And if you don't have goodwill towards the other person, then it's going to be harder to connect. But as I'm saying that out loud, I'm thinking, to your point, I got to make sure I have goodwill.
Right.
Because sometimes I don't have goodwill towards one or both of the children, and then I'm going to come in and make a mess.
I love that.
This episode of Webe Pärents is brought to you by Webe Calm, the child calmer designed by doctors and loved by parents.
Struggling with bedtime routines or managing your child's anxiety? Webe Calm transforms deep breathing into a fun and engaging activity, helping kids find their inner calm. Perfect for bedtime stressful moments or any time your child needs a little extra help to stay calm. Visit webecalm.com to learn more and bring tranquility to your family. Webe Calm, because we be in this together.
Topics and tools.
In Topic and Tool, we dive into a key parenting issue, examining its significance and the challenge it presents. We'll equip you with a practical tool or skill that will help you effectively address this in your everyday life. So let's get started. So our topic of today, again, is mediating fights. How do we do that in a way where we can stay connected and we can bridge connection versus escalating disconnection? And we gave a few examples that we started with on how good intentions still led to escalated outcomes.
Right. We can use even the example with Kylie and Jordan with the sharing of the makeup and the clothes. But the first thing that happens when I hear the fighting is I come in and I want to be the detective, the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And that's a lot of work. So it's to back up and say, hey, those aren't my roles anymore. Do I want to support connection? Am I activated? And if I'm not activated, okay, let's go in and see if they're in a place where they would like some support with connection. And sometimes they don't. Like you said, they're in too much pain, which means to me, now they're just needing empathy. And sometimes I can't give empathy to one in front of the other because they'll think I'm taking their side. So I'll say to one or both of them, I'll say, are you in a place where we can sort of try and work this out together as a team? Or do each of you need heart hugs, which is our term for empathy? And if so, maybe we go into another room and I'll do empathy with one person and I'll do a heart hug for the other. So depending on that, I want to make sure that regardless, I'm not trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong. I've been trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong. The energy in me has shifted, not towards connection, but towards that model of detective, judge, jury, and executioner. So when kids are in pain, that we call that an empathy collision. I learned that from my mentor, Sylvia Haskvitz, in nonviolent communication. I love that term, empathy collision, where both sides are needing empathy and they can't hear or support the other person. And as a parent, what we can do is be the person that can hear both of them. So then the goal is empathy, 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 and explain to the listener why, and whether it's Kylie or Jordan, hey, empathy doesn't mean I'm agreeing with the person's choices. It means that I'm trying to understand your experience. And if I can understand your experience, then you'll start to soften and you'll actually get connected to your needs. Because at first, Kylie will say, Jordan's not sharing with me. And Kylie feels hurt. And they're like, why? She doesn't care about me. And then Kylie's busy feeling hurt. And if I do anything other than empathy, Kylie's not going to feel like her hurt is being held. So.
I think that's a really important point. And I think if we back up and kind of even connect to times where we have been engaged in bickering, it's the empathy collision are two people who so want to be heard and are not being heard. And it might be that they're not being heard because the strategy that they're using to communicate may be a tragic one, may not be something that can be received at the time, but underlying that all is a need to be heard. And when you can offer empathy, you are offering them that vehicle in which they can be heard. And I love that, going back to the tool of the heart hug, and heart hug you can hear more about it in our very first podcast, which is all about the heart hug. But basically that tool is a space that it's a mutual agreement to hear another person without judgment, criticism, blame, shame. And it invites in these particular situations, even a sibling who hears, even Kylie who hears, I am now going to give Jordan a heart hug, is very clear that that is not you taking sides. And so she can even make space for you giving Jordan a heart hug. Whereas if she heard you just give Jordan straight out empathy, that may be confused.
Right. So calling it a heart hug is really important because it's a container of, okay, dad or mom is going to empathize with Kylie and with Jordan, and we're both going to be heard. And there's no sense of sort of scarcity of stage time.
Right.
We're all going to get our needs heard and cared for. Even if Kylie can't care for Jordan's needs, dad can. And that's really when the bickering and the fighting and the lashing out at each other is a tragic need for empathy. That's really what the immediate need is. And that they get really upset. It's regulation, where, we'll do some webe breaths before we'll even go to empathy. Then they go to empathy because when somebody wants to make someone else feel the pain that they're feeling, that's when they lash out. And they're trying to get you to feel how bad they're feeling. So giving empathy is great. It's really helpful. And coming in and trying to identify who's wrong and who needs to be punished and correcting and educating and saying, well, it's really important to share and you got to share. And when you're not sharing, Jordan, you're not being nice. Or with Kylie, hey, Kylie, even when you're upset, it doesn't mean you yell and scream and meet, right? That's the correcting and educating. That's where we want them to share our values for, consideration and care for other people through sharing and meeting our values, around kindness and care, even when you're upset with somebody.
You just made a very interesting point, and I think it's important to tease that out. Sharing, to me, is a strategy to meet needs for generosity and care. You don't need to necessarily share in order to care for someone or even have a generous spirit or intention, right? Adults don't share everything with each other, and there's no expectation to do that, but somehow we put that expectation on children as if that is an intrinsic value, that is a need. And so even kind of connecting to that, I think is important for us as parents and then for kids as well.
Yeah, I like that you pointed that out, that sharing is a strategy, not a need. And the need is consideration, care.
Mattering.
Right. How you show up in your friendships and community and contributing to other people, being aware, I like that. So really watch that desire to correct and educate and look for that blame energy. Blame energy, as I was talking about, where you come in as that parent and you're like, all right, who's the perpetrator and who's the victim? And if we come in with that energy, again, we squash connection versus there's two people who have needs that aren't being met and they're in pain and they're both needing empathy, that's a different energy. So bickering over strategies versus connecting on needs, that's what's happening with the kids, and they're bickering over strategies. And what we want to do is ultimately get them to connecting around needs and then working as a team to figure out strategies.
In fact, I think I would say that 99, maybe even 100% of bickering occurs on a strategy level.
100%.
We're not really bickering over needs. And oftentimes, if you get down to the level of needs, it's needs that are shared. There's a mutuality around shared needs, just different strategies that we're using to try and meet those needs. And
Exactly.
Those strategies are colliding up against one another.
Yeah, that's a core tenet of nonviolent communication, where you never have conflict over needs, you have conflict over strategies and priorities. So someone might have a priority to meet this need now, where someone else might not need that same need met in that moment, right? If I have a need for food and I'm hungry, and the other person is not hungry, they don't have a need for food. For me, the need for food is a priority. For them, it's not. But we both can connect around, oh, you have a need for food. I can get what that's like. I can imagine you really want to find something to eat. So that is really helpful. And then again, argue over strategies of using the food example as a need. It could be, do I eat something in the car? Do I take something out of my bag? Do I pull over? Do we do fast food and drive through? Do we sit at a restaurant for an hour? And then people start arguing over what way they want to meet their need for food. But if you can get back to the food, right? So the same thing here. Can we get, and that's really the skill, is helping people get to their needs, and more importantly, helping each person hear and understand the needs of the other person.
Right.
And once we get there, strategies manifest very easily.
Yeah. And in those moments of bickering, there's also the opportunity to understand what is preventing someone from saying yes. So in all of the examples, in the first example with the little girl who's navigating board games and she had two cousins who wanted to go first, what was the need behind going first? Right? Is there a need for acknowledgement? Is there a need for recognition? Is there a need for mattering?
And just their play. Maybe they're really excited to play the game, and going first, they get the chance to do something that, if you go second, you're worried you won't have the same chance, or you're just so excited, or, again, regulation, right? I got to wait. What if they're going to do something that I can do? And
right. What if they take a chance away from me? Right. All of that stuff.
Right. With kids, sometimes there's this, even if it's not part of your reality, they can be worried there's a scarcity of opportunity, or, so they're like, if I don't go first, if it doesn't happen my way, if I don't say it right now, it's not going to happen. And then they can feel really scared or insecure. And then there's needs there around safety and security that are coming up for them. Like, hey, you're still going to have a fun, great game, even when you go second. And you're still going to have opportunity to win or play, or all the fun things that you think are going to happen when you go first can happen when you go second. And can we take a second? Do you know how good it feels when you go first? Wouldn't that be nice to help someone else feel that way once in a while too? And would you want them to support you going first sometimes too? So helping them also connect to the contribution and the community aspect needs, right? How do we care for each other and support each other? And I think when you can help them understand, okay, you are secure, you are safe, your needs are going to be met, and let's connect to everybody's needs, and let's care about everybody together, all of a sudden they soften. And I think that's a magical moment when they go from feeling tight and their heart is hard, and they're so tense and they're worried about, it's fear and reactivity because they think their needs aren't going to be met. Once they start connecting around needs, they soften. And we actually in our family will ask, hey, is your heart feeling soft, or is it still a little tight? And if it's still a little tight, we haven't fully empathized and heard them. And that softening is essential. And then they can start to hear the other person. And then from there, again, the connection happens, the magic happens.
Yeah. And I think you named checking your own pulse and seeing your level of resourcing before you enter into a mediation. But I think the other piece that's also important when you're checking your own pulse is time. How much time do you have? And you kind of touched on that earlier when you said, oh, I'll engage, and then I realize I have 3 communications, after which I'm feeling depleted and I'm done. It's when we can commit a little more time to give the situation a natural unraveling versus an urgency to figure it out, which is in some sense an attachment to the outcome happening within this amount of time. It's also more, I think there's a greater chance of success around getting to those needs and around getting to that softening that you describe.
Yeah, time constraints really hurt connection.
Yes. Now, at the same time, there can't be the expectation that parents are just going to have endless amounts of time to deal with all of the bickering that they experience with their children. So it's also, how can we get to the core of a matter? How do we address the needs and really provide either that hard hug or that empathic space to get curious and uncover without, thinking, oh, this is the rest of my day here is going to be uncovering these bickering situations.
And that's a common concern, but as you get proficient in these skills, it doesn't take that long, and it actually saves you a lot of time, because even if you come in there and drop the hammer and you decide this person's right, this person's wrong, and yell at them, and now there's disconnection, you feel bad afterwards, they feel badly, everybody feels terrible. So now you've just gotten to feeling terrible more quickly. And that's not what we want, even if we get our way. And never do you feel good when you get your way through people feeling bad. A lot of times we think we want our way, but that's not really what we want. We want to feel good. And ultimately that requires that everybody's way. So given the opportunity, though, what's exciting about this, too, is that I've found that children come up with amazing strategies on their own, often strategies I don't even think of, after they get to connection. And once they, if Kylie understands Jordan's needs and Jordan understands Kylie's needs, they'll say, well, what if we do this? And I'm like, that's a great idea. I didn't even think about that. So take the burden off yourself as the parent having to come up with strategies and solutions, and instead focus on empathy and creating a quality of connection, and everything else fills itself in.
I love that you say that, because that's the beauty of, when you offer a heart hug to Jordan, and Kylie's listening to Jordan's heart hug, there's a part of her that naturally softens as she begins to understand the yes behind the no, the reasons for Jordan saying no.
Right, because often Jordan's scared that her stuff is going to come back broken or different, and she's trying to meet a need for protection and predictability, that it's going to come back the way it was. It's going to be where she wants it when she wants to use it, and it's going to be in the same condition. So for her, she's needing these for protection and predictability. And Kylie's like, oh, I get it. And then Kylie will actually be able to own, yeah, sometimes I do return things and they're not in the same condition they were when I took them. But Kylie can't own that when she's feeling hurt and angry,
right? Or
when I'm trying to point out that she was unreasonable and she's the perpetrator.
Right. And we can connect to that. The minute we feel like we're the perpetrator, we're going to go to defensive versus understanding or curiosity.
And perpetrators are still trying to meet needs. So if we just can let go of that old paradigm, it's just such a more connected, joyful place to be. And it's not that this is the right way to do it. It's just we find this a much more joyful way to do it.
Absolutely.
Should we talk about the steps?
Yeah, let's talk about our steps.
So the steps for this process of helping kids mediate, again, is to first take your temperature, take your pulse. Are you in a place where you can connect? Also know when you have to sort of pull the eject button. If you're like, I have like 5 exchanges and then I'm going to lose it, either decide to hold off, ask them to sort of take a break, and that we're going to all come back after dinner when we're more resourced. So You can still help it de-escalate, but then we don't have to all work it out right now. I'm in the middle of making dinner. But once you checked your, because a lot of times I find that parents will not realize they actually only have 3 or 5 exchanges before they're going to lose it. And we don't check in. And then we realize we didn't have much in us, much gas in the tank until we lost it. And then it's harder to recover versus going in. And I'd rather you pull out with kindness after exchange number 3 versus wait till number 5 or 6 where you lost it. So stop early and check in. Do you really have time to connect and let this unfold a little bit? And then once you do, go in for empathy and say, hey kids, I know you're both upset right now. I'd really like to do heart hugs for everybody so that we can connect. Are you all in a place to do that right now? Or should we just take a little break? All of us can recover with a little self-care, and then we can come back and try and work this out later. So it's checking in. Are they really interested in connecting versus just assuming they're going to because I am here and that's what we do? And assuming they all buy in, then I tell them, hey, I'm going to give each of you a heart hug. And it doesn't mean that I'm agreeing with either of you. I'm actually just seeing your experience and your perspective. So Jordan, when you hear me give a heart hug to Kylie, it doesn't mean I agree with her. And I'll ask Jordan, are you clear? And then I'll say, are you okay with me giving a heart hug in front of you, or would you like to leave the room? Or I'll say, who wants to go first and get their heart hug? And we have a little tool that if they both want to go first, on the odd days of the month, if it's an odd day, Kylie gets to choose. And if it's an even day, Jordan gets to choose. So that's sort of a known rule. But sometimes they'll just say, okay, go with this person and go with that person. Once we give them the heart hug, which is basically connecting to the feelings and needs. Hey, Kylie, I'm hearing that you're really upset, that you're feeling really hurt. You're also feeling sad and disappointed. You really wanted to use that dress or toy or whatever of Jordan's, and she's not willing to share it right now. And Kylie's, yes, and she's explaining and being heard. You can see her whole face soften, and I'm getting her. And you really want people to treat you with kindness and care. And also, Kylie, I'm hearing that you're confused. Like if Jordan's not using the toy, why wouldn't she just share it with you? Why would she want it to sit in her closet not being used when it can make someone really happy? And I hear that that's your model, Kylie, that when you're not using something, you would love for someone else to get joy out of that. And that's confusing for you. And sometimes you just think, if she must just not care about me if she wants it to sit in the closet when I could get joy out of it. Very painful. So Kylie then softens. And Jordan's also hearing this if she's there, which is helping Jordan see Kylie. And then I'll say, Kylie, is there more? And then we get to it, and then I'll go to Jordan. I'll say, Jordan, okay, now can I get a heart hug? I'll give you a heart hug. And I'll say, Jordan, I'm hearing how much you want choice, autonomy around what you share. And you don't want to have to deal with Kylie being upset if you don't agree to share. And I'm also hearing that you really want to share when it works for you, right? And then also you want to protect your stuff, that you're scared to share it sometimes. You want people to see that, especially Kylie. Because if you knew it was going to come back in the exact same piece it was in before, and that you would be able to find it when you want it, you'd be much more comfortable sharing. And Jordan's like, yes, Dad. And then Kylie's sort of softening as she hears that. And then I say, okay, now and I always tell them, this is the hardest part. I'll say, who can tell me what they're hearing the other person's needs are? So my goal is to get Jordan to be able to tell me what Kylie's needs are, or Kylie to tell me what Jordan's needs are. And I'll say, this is really hard, so I don't know who's going to be able to go first here. Because often when I'll say, who wants to go first and for the heart hug and tell me what happened, they both want to go first because they want to talk about their situation. But I'll say, whoever goes first has to be able to tell me the other person's needs. That's a real important thing. Get them to be able to tell the other person's needs. And then I say, before we do that, let's check and make sure our hearts are all soft. And I'll check my heart, they'll check their hearts, and we'll all say, yep, thumbs up, our hearts are soft. So then once they are able to do that, they will summarize the needs, and Jordan will say what she heard, and she'll paraphrase, and Kylie will then say what she heard and paraphrase. And then the kids will say, oh, we got it. And I'll say, is there more anybody wants heard? Do we all understand each other's situations and their perspectives and their feelings and needs? Yes. Are we ready to strategize? Or does anybody want anything else heard? So I'm really, really careful before we jump into strategy. I say, we're ready to strategize. Okay, great, because you guys come up, and I always tell them, you guys come up with great ideas. So now that you know Kylie's needs, and I might reiterate them, right? Kylie's needs for care and generosity and understanding and enjoyment, and Jordan, your needs for predictability and protection of your stuff. how can we meet all of those needs at the same time? And then they just start thinking, and then they start coming up with ideas. What about this? What about this? And they work as a team to figure it out. And that's the basic of the process of how to mediate a fight that's not about trying to find out who's wrong or who's to blame, but trying to restore connection between the two so they can figure it out.
I love that the ultimate goal there is for them to be empowered to figure it out on their own, and for them to get to a place where they want to do that and are willing to do that. And so that was very helpful to kind of hear the process. And I think that's going to lead us right into no skills to pro skills, where we can summarize a little bit of that.
No skills to pro skills.
In No Skills to Pro Skills, we highlight key aspects of addressing issues with and then without connection skills. So just to kind of summarize the process, and you can add anything at the end, is the idea is really when you're stepping into mediation of an argument, it's to start with checking your own pulse. Are you resourced enough, and do you have some time to devote to bridging connection? And then there's empathy for each child. And if there is already an agreement for a heart hug in place, it makes it so much easier to get to that empathic space with understanding from both arguing parties. And then it's giving each person a heart hug, really hearing where they're at and giving them the stage to completion to just kind of share what's coming up for them, what are their underlying unmet needs, what are they feeling, and providing an empathic space for them to be heard without judgment, criticism, blame, shame, advice, and so forth. Once both parties get a heart hug, or whatever your version of it is at home, then the check-in is, are we feeling complete with that empathy that we just received? If we are feeling complete, our hearts, in theory, should be soft. If they are not soft, that's indicative of the fact that they have not been fully heard, or there's more that they're holding on to that they haven't yet shared. So once hearts are soft, it's to invite the parties to share the other person's needs. What did they hear come out of the heart hug, and what would they guess were the other person's needs in beginning the bickering? And there's no strategy at this level at all. There's just a connection to needs. Once the needs are summarized and everybody's on the same page around what actually were the underlying issues, it's an opportunity to then get creative and expansive of how to meet those needs with strategies that work for both people. Would you add anything to that?
I think that's a great summary. I really like the idea, the awareness of the steps like that, and just very succinct. That was great.
Oh, wonderful. And so, with so many of the examples, including Kylie and Jordan's that we shared earlier, the goalies that wanted to be goalie the whole time, the board game, who wants to go first, the class project where one person had already invested time and the other person had not, and then to suggest, let's everybody just share equally. There were, in each of those situations, needs had gone unmet.
And there was a rush to figure out what to do.
Right.
So with the kid not going, who goes first, the parent, like, a lot of times we're not checking our own pulse. Why do we have to argue over who goes first? What's the big deal?
Right.
Right. Or why can't we just share it evenly, right, with the kid who invested all the work? Let's just do it evenly. It's so much faster. So a lot of times it's our needs that we're meeting in the way we're mediating versus the focus on connection. And sometimes it goes fine, right? What's the big deal? Who goes first? Okay, fine. I'll go, or this person can go, or I went last time. So sometimes it doesn't escalate. But when it escalates and there's an empathy collision, there's underlying needs.
Even when it doesn't escalate, there is suppression and repression and unmet needs, because underlying the strategy to go first is some need. And when we say, what's the big deal? Really, that's a shame cycle, right? Why are you making such a big deal? Why can't you just conform and just be easy, right? There's a lot of hidden words behind that.
Yeah,
what's the big deal?
That's a
right?
good point. I am glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, so even when we're not escalating, we're holding on to that, and those unmet needs get stored. And then they will come up in another bickering incident, because I already feel if it's Jordan and Kylie, or if it's the kid who wants to go first and what's the big deal, they never get to go first, there's a buildup of resentment around the other kids they're playing with. And then the next time they get into a similar argument, there's a quicker jump to seeing the other person as the perpetrator and really putting your foot down and saying, they always do this to me. I'm not going to give in this time, and so on and so forth.
Right, because if I say I want to go first in the game, I rarely care about that, so they won't get triggered. But if Kylie says she wants to go first, Jordan might quickly say, Kylie always wants to go first, right? There's that time wherein Jordan will be more likely to concede and just say, okay, I'll let her go, but she's actually suppressing and building up enemy images of Kylie.
Yes, indeed.
So the no skills can happen all throughout, right? The no skills can be did we not check our pulse? Did we not check? Are we really focused on connection, or do we have an agenda to resolve this quickly, or to identify who's right and who's wrong?
Right. So are we really giving a heart hug, or are we shooting advice and judgment into that heart hug?
Are we making them, this is where I struggle, I might try to get them to connect in the heat of the moment, and I'll be attached to them connecting. So even though my intention is connection, I'm attached to doing it now.
Yeah.
And I need to take a breath and trust that, hey, we can work this out later. It's going to be okay. So no skills can even come with trying to execute connection skills.
Yes, indeed.
And then obviously we talked about, are we identifying who's right or wrong? Are we educating? Are we giving advice? Or are we just giving connection? And are we burdening ourselves with the strategies and coming with strategies? And if we even come with strategies, we think this is what's going to fix it, we're taking our mind off the connection. Instead, put all the strategies aside, do the connection, and then see what strategies naturally bubble up after the connection. I found that those are usually different than the ones I had before we did the connection.
And I think in the beginning of all of this, there's going to be trust building, because if part of what allows Kylie and Jordan to step into the heart hug space and the mediation space is there's an established trust around we really are trying to figure it out. And if mom and dad are supporting us, they're supporting us in figuring it out, not in choosing one child over the other. But when you first begin to practice this, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in bringing it home, there's the need to establish trust. To really let your kids know, we can always go back to you guys going back and forth on your particular strategies, but there might be another way. So let's explore together. And that invitation for exploration, without saying, Kylie, you can't do it that way, or Jordan, you can't do it that way, really allows for maybe a softening into that mediation space.
Bringing it home.
In Bringing It Home, we focus on integrating today's concepts into your family life. We'll provide tips on how to invite your family to collaborate and explain these ideas in ways that everyone can understand. So we talked a little bit about one of the first things in Bringing It Home is to invite the family to a different approach. And in that, there's always time to default to the old ways, but there might be another way that feels better for everyone. And that's the invitation is, can we play and explore together and discover if there is another way?
Yeah, I like even joking with them. We can continue just hitting each other here, verbally, physically. Let's just take turns popping each other with nasty comments, and they'll smile, but I'll say, but there is another way. Mm-hmm. Would you like to try another way? And once in a while, they'll say, no, I want to keep hitting her. And I'll say, no. And I'll watch. I'll say, hey, but it's not too hard. We don't want to cause bruising. And then they'll laugh. We'll disarm. But ultimately,
and only for so long, right? Because just like you said, nobody likes to be in that state of, even when you get somebody to obey you and it's through disconnection, it never feels good.
Right. Kylie definitely will feel bad even if Jordan agrees with her, but it's because Kylie used power or, disconnecting methods.
Right. And Jordan is completely unsettled when she's in disharmony or disconnection with Kylie. It doesn't feel good for them. So
trusting that they naturally value connection and care, and they're just their hearts are in pain, and they're sort of so guarded and shut down that they can't connect to their care for the other person in that moment.
I think underlying, we all value connection and care. And where we get caught up is we don't trust that we truly matter to someone else and that they're going to want to meet those needs. So it's reassurance around that. It's an invitation to explore that. And I think that's kind of where it starts. And then it's modeling, right? It's just like you said, starting with modeling heart hugs, making that a real safe space for people to share and trust that will be an empathic space. And for other people in the family, hearing you giving a heart hug to either one child or to a partner, knowing that is not you siding with them, but you giving them an empathic space to be heard, and the trust around that neutrality.
And even modeling it with whoever's having a conflict. Like anybody can be that third person. So having one of the children, do that, I think encouraging them to be the mediator as well. So if I'm in an argument with Kylie and saying, hey, Alona or Jordan, do you have space to help us to give each of us heart hugs, and then we can try and connect with each other? So it doesn't have to be just the parent with the kids, but anybody in the family. So having an agreement with the family around, hey, when we're in conflict, there's usually a third person that's a little more resource that can help us get to connection. And then I love practicing it and creating, fire drill, fake conflicts just to see, so me and Alona can practice and say, oh, we're in a conflict. And then who can help us? Anybody want to help me and mom work a conflict out? And then they get to practice being on the other end and seeing, oh, okay, mom, do you want me to hear you first? Or dad, do you want me to hear you first? And I'll be like, I want you to hear me first. And, so we can play around with that too, where they get to practice it. It doesn't have to just wait for a true conflict.
And low-hanging fruit, right? So it's fire drilling or creating conflict, but it's also small conflicts, playing around with small conflicts versus waiting for the big ones. And I think that is a really great way to instill trust in the process, is that familiarity around the process. So I love that. And then celebrating successes, when we can achieve a harmony after disharmony, where we can reestablish connection after disconnection, to really celebrate that, acknowledge it, name it.
And always celebrating and encouraging, right? It can be something little, like you said, oh, you both want to sit in the front. Does anybody want to help mediate this connection challenge? And then do it. So they might not realize that's an opportunity, but as the parent, you can point out these little opportunities all over the place.
Just one last thing.
Matt, do you have our one last thing?
One last thing, I do. So remember, focusing on empathy instead of blame turns conflicts into chances for growth and teaches kids to handle future challenges with compassion.
Your experiences and feedback are invaluable to us.
Please email us at parents@webetogether.com with your own cheers and tears, as well as any questions or stories you'd like to share.
Thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting with you next time.